Welcome to Tech Intersect. I'm your host, Tanya Evans, and my life and work exist at the heart of law, business, and technology. Yeah, I've earned a few fancy titles and degrees over the years, but the bottom line is I'm a writer, speaker, teacher, and lifelong learner, and I'm really excited that you've joined me on this journey. So what is Tech Intersect? Well, it's authentic, empowering conversations with really interesting guests to demystify complex topics to prepare you for the future, because your future is now. And it exists where law, business, and tech intersect. Get ready to listen, learn, and leverage. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 102 on February 15th, 2022. In this episode, I chat with one of my favorite legal eagles, Jason Civalleri, about some thorny legal issues and trends that are currently or may soon affect cryptocurrencies, DeFi, DAOs, DAO governance, and NFTs as securities. Jason also dives into the hot off the presses SEC settlement agreement with BlockFi. It has to do with BlockFi's lending product deemed to be a security. Jason explains why the decision may actually provide a light at the end of the confusing tunnel of when lending products require registration with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Now, Jason is an attorney with the boutique law firm Horizons Law. He has a stellar reputation for keeping members of the crypto community out of jail until they start the revolution. He is a deep knowledge and appreciation for crypto, from tech to business to the ethos and spirit of crypto, and of course to the law. And he has helped to advise many notable projects, including Dapper, Solana, Synthetix, Orca, Genesis Block, Grayscale, and Coinlist. And he's worked with fully decentralized business entities, represented anonymous hackers. He talks about that in this episode. And those, of course, that stop hackers, and merged billion-dollar DAOs, advised on emerging DeFi derivatives and products, pioneered new open-source licensing, and even pioneered methods for clients to offer high-yield, centralized lending products without authoritative backlash. So clearly this is another must-listen episode. I had a lot of fun with it, and I definitely will have Jason back on a more regular basis so that we can continue to chop up the headlines and the latest legal eagle news. The number one question I get for the podcast is about the legal matters that matter in the wild, wonderful world of crypto assets. So I will continue to deliver that content. Okay, before we hop into the ep, please take a moment to follow this podcast and then like, share, and comment so that others who would benefit from this content can find it. It's time to listen, learn, and leverage. Let's get started. In this episode of Tech Intersect, I am so excited to welcome a friend in crypto and the law, Jason Civalleri, who I had the great pleasure of working with when I created the first ever, evidently, blockchain, crypto, and law online certificate program at the University of New Hampshire's Franklin Pierce School of Law. I was very blessed to have Jason and some other amazing adjuncts come on and help me build that program and make it what it turned out to be. So I'm forever in his debt. And I'm also a huge fan of his intellect and insight on the intersection of crypto and law. He has a really great point of view and a good 30,000 foot view, as well as up close and personal, all the things that are going on in the legal landscape. And so I've invited him on today to chop it up a little bit about where we've been from a legal landscape point of view, where we are, so many fascinating and interesting things going on in the space, and where we're going. We'll talk about all of that in a moment. But first, Jason, welcome.
Hi, Tanya. Great to be speaking with you.
Excellent. Well, you're one of my favorite attorneys in the space. I don't even know that you know, whether or not you know, how much you helped me in those early years in particular, because you've been in the space for so long and just had a really keen eye and appreciation for not just the legal challenges, but the solutions. And I always tell my students, it's not about telling clients everything that can't be done. We're very good at that. But the best and most effective lawyers in general, but in the crypto space in particular, are all about solutions. I know you are very invested in keeping members of the crypto community out of jail until they start the revolution. And the revolution, it won't be televised, but it absolutely will be driven by software. So first of all, tell us about what you're doing now and then your background in the legal landscape, and then we'll get into some of the big issues of the day.
My background in crypto, I started in Bitcoin back in 2012. Bought my first Bitcoin when it was well below $100. 2016, got introduced to Ethereum by a friend from high school, Taylor Monahan. She started my Ether wallet. And at that time, I was working on my law degree. I learned Solidity, Python, JavaScript, a few other programming languages, and really just sort of dove into getting nitty-gritty with the technical side of all this. Since then, I've been practicing, essentially you can call it crypto law, I suppose. Been working with Horizons Law, which is it's a boutique firm catering to the blockchain space. We've helped a whole range of clients, ranging from we've had Synthetix, which is a decentralized synthetic asset or synthetic token protocol. We've done work for Coinlist and for Grayscale. A lot of work on. We helped launch Solana in its early days, and as well as did some work for Polkadot, and now a lot of the sort of newer and what I think are some of the really cool protocols. We're very fortunate to helping them try to navigate this legal terrain as it still evolves as fast as the technology does.
Speaking about some of those legal issues, what are some of the most pressing concerns? And obviously, I know you can't always talk about specifics, but in general, you've heard a lot of obviously, when you think about the initial coin offering or ICO boom and bust and kind of cycling of some of the concerns and topics in the non-fungible token space, when you think of it from like perhaps speculation and things like that. But there are some core pressing legal issues for any project or group that seeks to enter either token issuance or to get into decentralized finance or to come up with various layer 2 solutions. What are some of the things that folks, certainly on crypto Twitter, but in your orbit, are most concerned about that you find to be pressing legal issues today?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, or at least the most discussed, is the securities issue. Today we just had the SEC's release of the BlockFi settlement. BlockFi is a centralized company that offered or has historically offered to U.S. persons very high yield interest-bearing accounts. Essentially, they resemble bank accounts. So if you send them some Bitcoin, they would offer you, for example, in the range of 4 to 10% APY interest on your deposits of Bitcoin. Obviously, this is very favorable, and if you're planning on holding for a while, you might send it to them. But the SEC just came out today with its settlement with BlockFi, stating that those were in fact securities offerings, and they actually offered a somewhat crystallized path that both BlockFi and other companies that are similar to BlockFi can follow to become regulated and register with the SEC. So that's one aspect of it, is how do these centralized players work? Last September we saw Coinbase was about to launch its Lend product. That was very similar to BlockFi, and a lot of us attorneys were saying this looks very similar to a note under Reeves or a security under Howey. I've advised clients in the same position to go down Reg D paths and for better or worse, only offer to accredited investors. So very exciting to see that now we have a path that possibly these can start reaching retail. That's one aspect. Governance, figuring out how to sue a DAO is one that comes up a lot. And licensing for NFTs. I think this will probably be the year of NFT intellectual property lawsuits. There's a whole range of those various issues that we're thinking about in this world.
Yeah, there are so many interesting things. And so let me I want to put a pin in the non-fungible token conversation, because I actually want to ask you about your thoughts on potential securities issues when folks are thinking about fractionalization of NFTs and, the difference between everybody throwing money in a pot, I don't know, like a DAO for the purpose of purchasing, which is one thing, but you certainly can, we see these other projects that not only come together for the purpose of purchasing something, but in the world of Ethereum, ERC20s, representing particular value over time or in the future, and what that dividing line is. I mean, that's what people pay the big bucks. And this is not legal or financial advice. The two lawyers just chopping it up and talking, but obviously these are some of the things. So I want to come back because I want to have a fuller discussion on NFTs. Okay. This is a great day to actually come together and talk about this. I wanted to talk at a high level of where we are in terms of securities regulation, to be sure. And then we have 2022-26 come out today when we're speaking. So this episode will air on the 15th. And so this is definitely some great breaking news to kind of reflect and respond to this agreement to pay. First of all, the amount of money, 100 million. Sometimes we've seen settlements that have been south of that or maybe north of that. And so I'm wondering, what do you think that's hitting the right notes in terms of the amount of money given, everything that seems to be agreed to in the settlement?
It's sort of a double side. I mean, on one side, as I mentioned, many of the practitioners in the space saw this coming or some level of this coming. And obviously BlockFi forged ahead and there's some questions about its actual solvency that need to be addressed and are fairly serious. But on the other side, this is the first opportunity to have some level of compliance with some crystallized guidance from the SEC for these products. And it seems very difficult to say, you're on the hook for $100 million because you didn't comply with the rules that we are setting as we tell you that you didn't comply with them. That's sort of the other side of it. So I suppose it's just the cost of doing business. BlockFi has been very successful and is they have very high profit margins. Obviously, $100 million is significant. It's not a small amount. But overall, it doesn't seem like it's going to put the company out of business, and they're going to, they will probably comply in the future. So it may just be the cost of having the opportunity to make those large margins early on.
It makes me think of some of the earlier SEC. I'm thinking of a case in addition to some of these settlements, and the case that I'm thinking about is decades before, so that doesn't have anything to do with crypto, but it has something to do with what you just mentioned in terms of the difference between a rulemaking or an adjudication and the role that agencies have in either creating rules and then enforcing them prospectively, or rendering a decision as it relates to a particular regulated party, right, for past behavior. And so it does strike me, the point that you've made about, we have the existence of some rules. I think from the SECs would believe that this is coming under existing rules and regulations. And I can hear from the industry the pushback of that perhaps this specific ruling didn't exist, and yet this is going to be applied retroactively. And also, to your point earlier, provides a framework and a roadmap for those who would come after. So I'm wondering your thoughts about that.
Yeah, it's really a good point. The SEC always says, in fact, these were always securities under the SEC's view. But if that were the case, BlockFi would have complied already. BlockFi and the others are Celsius and obviously Coinbase Lend, Coinbase being a publicly traded company. They would have already figured out this framework. They have some of the best attorneys in the industry,
right?
Looking at this and trying to figure out how to read between the lines and build something. So that's where it's hard to buy into the SEC statement like that. And it isn't. I haven't really seen a lot of pushback so far. Obviously the decision just came out today, and we haven't had a full chance to digest it, discuss it. But I haven't so far seen a lot of pushback from other practitioners saying that the path forward was necessarily bad or would be difficult to comply with, as much as it just wasn't clear before today.
Right.
And there are multiple ways, including, as I mentioned, I'd been advising clients just to take the safe route and comply with Reg D.
Right.
There are a number of different paths to be compliant and offer these products. So I wish it had gone through some kind of rulemaking or some method where it doesn't involve, finding a company
Hmm.
failing to comply with the rule that they're announcing in the decision.
Right. And it makes me think of the impact that this ruling will have on existing products. They may not be precisely the same. So I'm thinking Gemini's Earn, for example, or
Mhm.
some of the other, think of Aave and some of the
Yeah.
others. And what's going to be the reverberating effect of this on future behavior? Sometimes, we see, even if there is a group or a company that thinks that they can win, they may err on the side of extreme caution. I know I'm a cautious person. I hear in what you're saying, you're advising folks with whom you interact, just, play it safe. I wonder the impact of the industry bracing for impact and playing it safe, and the impact that that might have on innovation.
Oh, I mean, it's amazing when you go abroad and see how many products are advertised at many of the crypto conferences and trade shows compared to what's going on in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a number of clients who are founded in the U.S. either move overseas or turn off access to the U.S. In
Mm-hmm.
an attempt to avoid enforcement actions. So I think it's crypto's one of those double-edged swords. There's a lot of room for very devious or bad behavior, and there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of room for error and just accidents or even negligence. And perhaps Americans aren't being exposed as much as those overseas. But on the other hand, you've got all of a sudden you've got CZ
Yes.
topping the list of the wealthiest crypto people in the world. That is not an American operation. And you've got a lot of people who are also being exposed to the upside that crypto represents that Americans aren't exposed to. You think of some of these sort of social issues that are happening in the U.S. And how there's a lot of conversation around wealth and income discrepancies.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, they're locking out these high risk yet high reward opportunities that would be available to the main street. And in fact,
Mm-hmm.
have been an avenue for a lot of advancement for people who are willing to take on that risk. So it really, I don't know if it hinders innovation substantially, because
Mm-hmm.
at this point we live in a globalized digital world where you can raise money from anywhere now.
Right.
um, but it does maybe having some kind of impact on the larger culture of the United States, possibly.
And perhaps that's the reason that we see this mass exodus, or this, I don't know, great migration. We have the resignation going on in the workforce, and maybe a migration to decentralized governance. And so you mentioned governance and a lot of questions around that. We see a dramatic uptick in two things that we were talking about, several years ago:
Mm-hmm.
decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, and also non-fungible tokens. We see the surge of DAOs like the Constitution DAO or People. What are your thoughts around the uptick in this level of organization and the role of governance tokens in the overall legal landscape?
Constitution DAO was always a very interesting move. And it's too bad it wasn't successful because it was a
I
fascinating
know.
experiment.
Yeah.
But we've had projects like Kickstarter, products like Kickstarter and GoFundMe that, in theory, this could have happened before.
Right.
And so, what's the question of why is it now happening with crypto when there was a clear path and an ability for this to happen in the past? I think part of it is DAOs also come with the rules of governance. It's hard to understand how through a GoFundMe how that would then translate into participants in a GoFundMe then also having a say over what museum they're going to put
Right.
document into. And maybe that's easier on chain, but it's still possible. There's still Discord voting, and there's still methods that have been around for a while that
Mm-hmm.
could have allowed that to happen. I think part of it is simply it demonstrates that it really has removed the intermediaries for a lot of this.
Right.
In order to participate in a Kickstarter, you actually have to go through a bank. You then have that will go through Visa. There might be Square in between that's handling the actual payment process. And then it ultimately ends up at Kickstarter. And these are all intermediaries that are taking a cut and setting a different set of rules and having and each of them have their own compliance departments determining what users can and can't do. And you bring them into the sort of Wild West nature of blockchain, where all of that is handled by the technology itself. And so perhaps that might explain it. So that would have been really interesting. Had it succeeded, how do you actually claim that the Constitution DAO owns the documents or can enter agreements beyond that? Because it's not clear exactly what type of entity. And I know that they had some level of a path for that, but I remember thinking at the time it wasn't sound. It hadn't been proven. There was a lot of questions that just from my legal perspective, looking at it from the outside, were questionable. So that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. Is how are these DAOs going to be regulated as some sort of entity that can enter contracts without exposing all the participants into a large amount of legal liability? And it's a massive question that we constantly have. Another example where I've seen this a little bit. I've been advising a company that's working on basically a sports betting protocol. And currently, they don't actually involve wagering yet. You can have a sponsor for a competition, and that can sit outside of gambling laws. But the question comes up: how do they actually comply with state-level gambling licensing laws that all require an entity to register with the state?
Right.
And they're looking for a casino with a house that has ample room to rip off, the users or the gamblers or participants, and they're trying to regulate them and keep an eye on them. Whereas you have this protocol that just handles it all very transparently. And there is no entity. There is no need for that casino or house. But therefore, there's also not a path to register with the states to do it legally.
Right.
And so now we have discussions around, do we form an entity to, and for this purpose, and how does it interact with the DAO? And, they're hard questions. But it's also fascinating, looking at how the old laws and so many of these regimes were formed thinking that you had untrustworthy people capable of doing untrustworthy things. And now we've created a whole technology and movement around the fact that, has minimized that possibility in a lot of the ways that it could have been done in the old world. It's created some new opportunities for very bad actors, but it's eliminated or minimized some of the old ones. And I think that's really where the incongruence between the old legal systems and the new technology really are pronounced.
You love listening to podcasts, but have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you want to build a brand, grow your business, or are looking for an excuse to talk about your favorite hobby. Whatever your reason for making a podcast, Buzzsprout is the place to start. Since 2009, Buzzsprout has helped over 300,000 people launch their own podcasts. Buzzsprout walks you step by step through the whole process and will give you powerful tools to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. Ready to get started? Click the link in the show notes to get our free step-by-step guide to starting your podcast today.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of Tech Intersect. Our conversation will continue in a moment, but first, a word on an exciting opportunity.
If you've tried to figure out crypto, DeFi, and NFTs on your own on YouTube University or Podcast College, and all you have to show for it are a lot of questions, but little, if any, forward progress, I invite you to visit advantageevans.com to get the answers you've been searching for about how to buy, store, and trade crypto and NFTs, and to access DeFi safely, legally, and confidently. Advantage Evans Academy offers everything from full-service VIP onboarding to prof-guided on-demand and cohort-based courses, as well as an engaging, informative, and supportive membership club, AE Explore Live, for as little as just $1 a day. This club is for you if you want to learn from well-respected crypto education experts like me, transform your relationship with money, generate wealth in the new digital cash economy, create digital ownership streams that lead to generational wealth, learn to vet, buy, store, trade, earn, and sell cryptocurrencies, engage in DeFi to lend and leverage your crypto, create, buy, and trade creative and collectible NFTs, and network with other crypto-curious enthusiasts in an inclusive environment. You'll gain all of that and more in a wonderful community of like-minded, lifelong learners ready to get in and to win. If that sounds like you, join us. Visit advantageevans.com to get immediate access to the resources you need and deserve. That's advantageevans.com. Let's go and let's grow.
And now, back to the conversation.
I find it really, really fascinating because your point is really important that these intermediaries were providing the trust to facilitate and, in some cases, de-risk interactions between parties who don't know each other and or don't trust each other. Sometimes also providing some type of liquidity. There were all of these roles that could not be accomplished given the state of the art, the state of the technical art at the time. And the very system that was basically enshrined to offer trust became one of the most non-trusted parties on the planet.
Yeah.
And, we've upended it, and you have this surge of software protocols and really, pieces of software that say we don't have to trust each other. We're going to, of course, you and I have talked over the years, trusting the code, right? And the law of code, Lex Cryptographica, and what that means. And also solving through software a number of the issues with the opaqueness of the financial markets, the premium information shrouded behind and secreted, I should say, to certain parties. And so you had this imbalance of information, right? And trying to inject balance with mandating that there be disclosures and all sorts of other things to put investors on proper footing or to protect consumers and investors. We constantly hear that, and that's critically important. But software is not without its problems, as you've mentioned. And that leads me to one of our final topics, talking about, obviously every day almost we hear of some type of hack. Now we know that in general, in most cases, it's not a blockchain, although it could be. Certainly centralized platforms are ripe because they're the honeypots that have all of the loot. And if why do people rob a bank? Because that's where the money is. Well, used to be. Money doesn't actually reside there anymore, but that's a story for another day. So what do we do about, and we see bug bounties going and increasing in value because the stakes are higher now. Every minute of every day, the stakes are getting higher. So how do we reconcile the promise of software that is providing the transparency and the security that cypherpunk thought was missing versus heists and bugs and all of the other stuff, real and imagined? Sometimes it's FUD, but sometimes it's real. So your thoughts?
It's one of the most fascinating aspects of what we work on. Who do we hold accountable? That's often the law's job is to figure that out when something goes wrong. If everything goes right, then there's really no need for laws. Right. A lot of the time, we had the wormhole attack recently, which I think it was around $230 million. Got siphoned off by some attacker. Yes. And very quickly, venture capital stepped in and reimbursed it. So it turns out it was insured in some way, and people hadn't known that. In fact, the venture capital firm probably didn't know that they were going to insure them until it occurred, and they realized it was in their best interest. I think that might be something that we see more of is as these types of attacks become clear and we start to get a lot of data on how they're executed and the types of attacks and best practices are more and more crystallized. Insurance policies or insurance protocols will start to emerge more and more. And I think that will actually help alleviate a lot of the concerns around the security risk. Because otherwise, it's a very hard question. I mean, do you hold the developers accountable? What if it was something that was even a reasonable programmer who was very skilled at what they were doing and had a long career still couldn't have recognized the bug or even recognized that maybe what they were experimenting with was just prone to flaws to begin with. So yeah, I think that's. I'm reminded I had one. I can't get too specific about it. There was one large, high-profile attack. It was in the media. Several $1 million were taken from a DeFi protocol, and I remember reading the reports, and they were saying it was it was clearly it's probably a state-level actor or someone who really knew what they were doing, and And I got a call that afternoon from someone that was using a voice changer saying,
Mm.
what do I do? I just accidentally hacked this DeFi protocol.
Mm.
And I was one of those where advise them the best that I can to not break the law.
Right.
That was such an incongruence between what had actually occurred,
Right.
how it was being covered and spoken about in the press, and I do look forward to more thought being put that direction. And how do you actually quantify risk in that regard, and then figure out ways to cover it. And then once that happens, then we can actually start talking about regulatory.
Right.
You're free to do X, Y, and Z as long as you have plugged into this insurance regime that we found is mostly suitable.
Right.
And I think that's going to be a really exciting time, and it's going to unlock a lot of stuff rather than having the SEC try to figure out, is the SEC responsible for ensuring that programmers are up to snuff on their coding? That will just, I guess the purpose of insurance is to de-risk, and that's what that emergence will probably do for the entire industry.
If you're an engineer or a scientist, you love Formula One, you love cycling, you love learning about how new technologies are changing the world around us, then I thought you may want to listen into my new podcast, the Neil Ashton Podcast. We talk to leading engineers and scientists from around the world, hear about their life stories, hear about new technologies, and hopefully educate you and give you a better sense of how key things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, supercomputing are changing the world around us. If that sounds like it's something you might like, you should come and have a listen.
The just in case, as my Nana used to say.
Exactly.
To be sure, it was fascinating to read about the after the fact of jump trading, jumping in to backstop that $320 million, is that accurate? $1 million exploit, and the role that crypto insurance for this ecosystem will be very interesting. Let's stick a pin in that, because I feel like we'll be talking about that for a while, and that might be one of the best safeguards, where we'll just invite in all of the intermediaries again, and we'll just go back to the old system. I don't know.
Maybe some of the intermediaries were doing a good job, it turns out.
Right. So to be determined, TBD. All right, final topic, and then I will lovingly release you back to your life today, is obviously non-fungible tokens. And there are a couple of things you can say at the end of this if you want to mention anything about the Super Bowl and Crypto Bowl, which is interesting. And we saw some really not so great, and then some really great ads last night. But the fact that the Super Bowl brought all the crypto to the yard was very, very interesting. But I want to talk to you about NFTs, of course. My favorite topic has been for years. And now I feel like I have vengeance, because actually we do have something to talk about, in particular from an intellectual property point of view. But earlier you mentioned this idea of NFT licensing. One, I just see a ton of brands getting into it. I know you do as well. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because of the value in intellectual property generally, probably copyrights in particular, but also the brand. So it's going to bring in trademark issues as well. And just the role and the intersection of non-fungible tokens, intellectual property. We see some of the speculation in the creative and collectibles space, and people coming in to quote unquote flip in the same way that they might invest in fungible tokens and try and invest. So a lot of that mindset is shifting to art, which to some is at odds with the idea of art for art's sake and the value of art. And so I hope we settle into that. But you'll have collectors, you'll also have investors, but maybe we'll at some point also get to this land of far lower priced uses and everyday uses of NFTs, or maybe for ticket sales. I like the Ticketmaster example and other things. Where are we with NFTs? Where do you think we're going? And then any thoughts you have about the potential risk of inadvertently tripping the SEC wire from a securities perspective as well, which is something I think about all the time. I don't think enough people are thinking about it or talking about it. So I'm happy to riff about that with you.
Yeah. First of all, I've been working with NFTs, since before the ERC 721 standard, which was, the first
amazing
emergence of a standard around ERC on the Ethereum blockchain. The potential and the power of NFTs. When you think of value, and all the things that have value and all the ways that we measure value and quantify value, currency is just one. It's a substantial, but it's one subset of value generally. And NFTs kind of represents the opening to everything else, which I think is really fascinating. And you can think of it from everything from transactions themselves, that contracts can have value, to real estate, to brand name. I can imagine intellectual property standards emerging in tokenized form, which would look something like an NFT. And so for Bitcoin to have come out first, and its first use case being currency as value, which is important, but then to define the whole thing as fungible versus non-fungible, I've always thought that was kind of funny.
Right.
But as for where we are right now, we are just sitting on the very, very beginning of this path.
Yeah.
And to a point where I'm not 100% convinced that where we are is anywhere useful.
Right.
Yet. And we might see some of the projects of today turning into some really cool things, next few months or next year. But when you talk about the security side of things, some of these NFTs, you go, it's an NFT drop. It's a randomized which one you're going to get, and apparently some of them are rarer than others, and that will give them value somehow to certain individuals. And never mind that you can go on OpenSea and see all of them and right click and copy and paste, and you can still look at it. In general, there's something about having the title that people claim certain people value. But you go to these NFT drop websites, and they talk about the technical and business prowess of the team, and they talk about the roadmap that the team has to increase the popularity of these tokens that the team itself is going to be doing. And by the way, maybe there's a chance that they're going to actually distribute some of the secondary rewards among the NFT holders themselves. And it reads just like the old ICO websites of 2017.
Right.
And it's very clear that there's some kind of JPEG involved here when before it was perfectly fungible tokens, and yet they're creating business enterprises with an expectation of profits based on the work of the centralized team. And yes, there's a JPEG involved somehow.
That will save the day, evidently.
Apparently, yeah. And I'm just looking through this, and I'm like, I know that the SEC is not dumb, and I know that they're focusing on high yield return accounts and not the $500 million worth of fraud that's going on in the crypto space. But at a certain point, some of these have to turn some heads. It isn't just that this is a really cool work of art, and I want to be the one that has the assuming intellectual property rights even apply. I want to have the rights associated with it, and I want to have that recorded by a blockchain. So many of these projects are oriented only around their profit-making potential, and it's not clear that anybody values the art itself, other than sort of as a sort of hand wavy. They have to say that for people to not worry about them being securities. So I do think there's going to be some reckoning for a lot of these projects. The other aspect of it on top of it is then they start talking about fractionalizing NFTs.
Right.
Then means creating somewhat fungible units within an NFT, and at that point I'm just wondering why they're not using fungible tokens to begin with. They've really increased gas prices in order to accomplish the same thing.
Right.
So yeah, I do think we're going to see a number of regulators step in eventually, and whether it's just from a fraud perspective or if it's even normal home garden securities violations. But yeah, and I do look forward to some of the other use cases of NFTs emerging where they don't have such potential for investment. They are useful for business and commerce and things like that. I think it'll be really powerful, and I do appreciate that NFTs, it seems like, has done a tremendous amount of bringing the idea of crypto to the mainstream.
Right.
Brought participation by celebrities and investors and the like that are they're all in it. They're not just looking for a buck. They're trying to figure out what the next cool innovation is going to be too, and they're bringing attention to it, and they're bringing capital to it, and they're making it cool,
right,
in ways that I'll never be able to.
We've been trying for years, and we have not been successful.
Yeah, and listen to the nerdy attorney about why this is so cool. So I think that aspect of the NFTs is probably why NFTs have been so valuable recently. Isn't that it isn't actually that they're cool as much as they're being seen as cool.
Right.
And then hopefully that will help fuel the next wave of innovations, both in NFTs and across crypto generally.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. And I will say one other thing, that I've seen the power and the promise for artists on the margins to have access to a global marketplace and actually receive a capital asset in exchange for their work. Is for now, there are millions of starving artists still. I get that. But for a core group in particular, and I think of the folks I work with at Black NFT Art and some of the artists that have really taken off and then have come back to reseed the community. So they'll sell something for tens of thousands of dollars and take some of those profits, not only to reorient their entire family in this generation to do things that they didn't think possible, particularly in the middle of a pandemic when money was very, very short, but then to use some of that to go back and buy, Genesis pieces and one of ones for folks who otherwise wouldn't sell, and that $200 or $2,000 really can be at a micro level quite transformative. And so I don't want to discount the impact that can have. And it's a nice thing to reflect on, in particular during Black History Month. So this idea of creative justice is interesting to me, in the same disintermediation of finance is interesting to see how it's playing itself out in the art world that has a similar number of intermediaries. But this idea of mainstream adoption is interesting and definitely happening. And that's the only reason that people pay millions of dollars for ads during Super Bowl, which was the crypto bowl, to continue to beat the drum that the future is now. So any parting thoughts about Super Bowl, crypto bowl, ad you thought worked, ad you think missed? What are your thoughts?
Well, I've learned not to listen to Larry David. That's for sure.
That was a win for me. That
was a good one. I thought the Coinbase one was one of the more creative ones. I was sitting there. I'm in Stamford, Connecticut right now, and so we went to one of the local sports bars to watch it. We're sitting at a bar, and this QR code comes up, and we're all looking at it. We're like, "What is that?" And everyone at the bar starts talking to each other, and I pull up my QR scanner, apparently being the most savvy in the room, and I scan it, and I'm like, "Of course, it's Coinbase. It's a crypto company," and But it got the buzz generating just in that room.
Right.
So everybody was talking about it for that and the next couple commercial slots. So that would have been a tough commercial to follow.
Right.
I don't remember what happened. And I thought, and of course, you saw my tweet on this.
Yes.
Of course, the very first thing that happens is Coinbase goes down, which is the most Coinbase thing to do is go down when it's supposed to be up.
Absolutely. I think maybe that was planned too. It's all a part of the plan. You see?
Perhaps. Yeah. They get used to our flavor of service. But, I did think that was a very creative one. And also, brought back that level of nostalgia of watching the screensavers bounce around the screen.
Yes.
I've seen people saying that they spent $16 million on that ad, and I'm curious how, other than funding the rewards that they have for in Bitcoin, because that was the most basic ad to be the most effective that I think I've seen in a long time.
Absolutely. So we had Coinbase, we had FTX. That was the one with Larry David. That was the win for me. We had eToro did one that was interesting. The first two are the ones that I heard the most buzz about, to be sure, good, bad, or otherwise. If people are talking about it, then you must. Oh, and Crypto.com did one for sure. I saw that one.
LeBron. There was just a South Park where they said, I've got. Fortune favors the brave, and they kept making fun of the tagline in the South Park. Wait, we can't be brave. That's how I lost all my money.
I love it.
Damon.
Love it. Yeah. Yes. Well, we gave him something to talk about in 2022. Glad that it's not just you and me talking. The whole world is talking about it, and that means the future is bright. We don't exactly know how this is all going to work out, but I love being on this wild, wonderful journey with you as we analyze the past, present, and future of crypto and the law. We don't know if we're supposed to call it crypto lawyers or blockchain lawyers, technology lawyers, and we don't know. but we know that people are paying a lot of money to talk to you. And I like that. So tell folks how they can learn more about you, connected with you and your work.
Yeah, connecting with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name, just search my name, or on Twitter. It's at Legal Limit ENT. You can also look up the law firm. Right now we're going through a rebranding, so the website's not perfectly up to snuff. But yeah, if you want to search for Horizons Law, I joined the law firm almost 3 years ago, and it was just me and the founding attorney, and we had one staff assistant as well. And the firm now, I think we just registered our 13th staff employee. Going on 5 attorneys.
Brilliant.
It has grown so fast, and we have been taking on such awesome work, and it's been really exciting to be a part of it. If anyone is looking for help in the legal space, I think we have more experience and insight than a lot of I don't want to say, a lot of the lawyers outside of the industry. There's a learning curve that it takes to get onboarded, whereas we speak the language and have been doing this since day one. So happy to chat.
Excellent. I'm going to send some of my Rockstar students your way too. You'd be very happy with some of the soon-to-be lawyers coming out with a head full of crypto knowledge and lots of Red Bull to get them through the late nights, because most crypto and blockchain lawyers I know, they don't sleep much, but they're amazing, and that includes you, sir.
We'll have a clerk that is graduating very imminently, which means we'll need a new clerk. So that'd be great.
Excellent. I'm going to tell them before I air this. That's not insider trading. That's just a jump. That's the privilege. That's host privilege.
Exactly.
I appreciate you so much. And I look forward to doing this more regularly. There's so much that goes on. Like every 90 days, we should be checking in with each other. We're probably going to be talking about something radically different, but I have always enjoyed speaking about this with you. So thank you for taking time to spend time with me today. Thanks so much, Jason, for chopping it up with me about some of the most pressing legal issues facing crypto and the people who love it and can be empowered by it if we do this thing right. Where users, investors, builders, and the future of work, wealth, and creativity go from here is anybody's guess. But that future will be shaped by the laws developed today. Innovation always marches on and often is at tension with existing laws and the legal framework. So calibrating laws in ways that support innovation while preventing harms like fraud and crime and theft is key. Be careful out there, because application of the laws to the creation, purchase, sale, and leveraging of crypto assets is almost as volatile and unsettled as the crypto market itself. Be sure to keep listening, learning, and leveraging this information on Tech Intersect. The space moves fast. But I'm here, your trusted legal eagle, to help you keep up and make it all make sense. Ping me on Twitter and let's keep the conversation going. And before we sign off, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this episode and this podcast with your networks. Follow me on social media and let me know what topics you'd like to hear more of and who you want to hear from. All right, that's all for this episode. Until next time, continue to shine.
Stay in touch with host Tanya Evans via your favorite social media. On Twitter at TechIntersect and on Instagram via the handle TechIntersect. This podcast has been produced by Stephanie Renee for Soul Sanctuary Incorporated.